So, why did your dog's training stop working? There's plenty of reasons why it may have stopped, but there are two main reasons that are the most common. So the first one is that the underlying emotion that was driving the behavior has not changed. And the second reason is that it didn't really stop working. It just wasn't repeated and practiced consistently enough that it became a new habit. So I'll talk about the first one just briefly. When I talk about the emotion behind their behavior, I talk about, for example, anxiety. So a dog might bark at a visitor that's come to the house because they're anxious. Maybe they're afraid of the visitor, or maybe they're feeling territorial, or maybe even they're excited. But those are the emotions that are driving that behavior. So if your dog's barking at the front door and you teach them the quiet command or a place, or you teach them to sit at the end of the hall, then the novelty factor of that will mean that they'll be able to succeed at it for a very short while. But underneath all of that training, they are still anxious or excited or territorial. And until we change that, that will always be more important than the training that you've done. So you'll see it over time, probably fairly quickly, really. The task that you've taught them will stop being effective and the emotion will start to take over again, and they'll just revert back to their original behavior. So to solve that, you need to find a training plan that will address the emotion at the same time. When you work on both of those things together, then your training will be much, much more effective. And you might not even need the tasks that you're teaching your dog, because once they're in a different emotional state, then they'll make better decisions of their own. So for example, if your dog's very anxious about people coming in because he's afraid of them, once you change that, then rather than barking at people because they've come in, maybe he'll go over to them himself. He'll be interested to meet them. Perhaps, he'll go and sniff, try to introduce himself. So you didn't need the training in that example, because it was only the emotion that was making him bark at the person that come in. Once that had gone away, he chose a new behavior that better suited his new emotion. The other reason why your behavior training may stop working is because you just didn't practice it enough. So you go through a couple of stages whenever you're teaching your dog something new. So the very first stage, it's really all about you. You're putting in so much work and effort. You have to be completely prepared. You're going to need to make sure that you've planned your training, that you've got everything you need, your clicker, your treats, your target stick, your special harness is ready. You'll maybe plan where you go. You'll be thinking about it the whole time, and you'll be really, really conscious of what you're doing. And you'll be setting your dog up to succeed really well. So at the very start of the training, you're doing all of the work, and your dog's needing you to do that because he doesn't know what you want him to do yet. So you have to do so much to get him to be able to successfully achieve something that you want him to do. Once you've done that and he starts to get the idea, you'll find that he'll start to do more and more of the work himself, and you'll be able to do less and less. So it will start to feel at this stage like it's working. You'll not have to put so much effort in. You'll not have to maybe plan your routes so much. You'll not have to consider your environment, make space, all those things that you've been doing at the start. As time goes on and you start to practice consistently, he'll start to get the idea of what it is that you're doing, and you'll do less and less of it, and he'll start to take the reins a little bit and make better decisions of his own, which are, in line with what you've been trying to teach him. This is the part where a lot of people, they go relaxed, they take a deep breath and they go, yes, we finally cracked this. And then you start to reduce the amount of effort and time that you put into it. But actually, he still needs your support at this stage. He hasn't learned this as a new behavior yet. This is not his new habit or default behavior. He still needs you there to help set him up and help make him succeed each time. But when you suddenly back off at this stage, then everything just goes back to the way it was, because you're not there supporting him, and he just goes back to his old behaviors, and then it feels like the training didn't work. But actually, when you get to the stage and you feel like, the behavior is starting to work, stuff is starting to happen, you're only really at the beginning of that learning journey. So your job now is to remain as consistent as possible still. Remind yourself of how you started your training. Come back at it with 100% energy, and keep going until that behavior consistently becomes something that he chooses to do. At this stage, he is now starting to form a new default behavior. This is his new habit starting to form, and he'll need to keep practicing this in order that it becomes his go-to choice of behavior. So let's imagine then that you're walking your dog in the park, and previously he's been quite reactive to another dog. At the start, you would have maybe spotted a dog in the distance. You've got your treat ready, your clickers ready. You're thinking about how are you going to maneuver him past this other dog? How much space will you need to make? You know, do you have the right treats? Everything will be there, and you'll be making him succeed because you'll be putting all of that effort into him. His default behavior at the start was to bark and lunge and cry maybe, or maybe he was avoiding, whatever it was, that was his default behavior at the start. So you had to put an awful lot of effort in to help him achieve a different behavior. So once you've gone through this training process, he started to get the idea, you're practicing and practicing, you're being very consistent, so he knows exactly what to expect from you. There's no grey areas, there's no sometimes she does this and sometimes she does that. He knows exactly what to expect. Once you've created that default behavior and you practice and practice and practice, that becomes his new habit. And then, just like the original behavior of barking and lunging, changing his behavior, his new behavior, now becomes really difficult, because instinctively his brain keeps wanting to do the new thing you've just taught him. So it actually makes it really hard for him to go back to his old behavior. But if you don't follow that cycle all the way through to the very end, it's still very easy for him to go back. And actually, very often the behavior you're trying to change was actually quite rewarding for your dog. So in that example, being reactive and going through that whole performance, the shouting and the lunging and all of that kind of stuff, is all about keeping himself safe. So at the end of that experience, when he came away and he was safe, nobody got hurt, nothing bad happened, that's rewarding in itself. So actually, it's his preferred behavior. So you need to work extra hard to make your new behavior beneficial to him, so he doesn't revert back. So you have to get through to this habit forming stage and then keep on going until it doesn't occur to him to do the old behavior. And even if it did, he'd have to be pushed really hard to want to go back to that old kind of style of behavior. So it's a bit like a set of scales. On one side, you've got your old behavior, and on the other side, you've got your new behavior. And when you start, the old behavior side of your scales is really heavy. You've got loads of history on there. It's rewarding for him. He likes to do that behavior because it keeps him safe, or it achieves some kind of goal for him. If he's jumping up, maybe he gets lots of attention. But whatever it is, on that side of the scales, it's heavy with past experience. So even when you start to train, you're really up against that. You know, you're adding new experiences onto the good side, the new behavior side of your scales, but it'll take a while before it starts to tip. But that tipping point is the quitting point for most people, because they think that they've won. You need to keep going until the other side of the scales is just as heavy as the old behavior side of the scales was when you started. So hopefully that answers your question. Either go back and look at the emotion. If the emotion hasn't changed in your training, work on that. And if the emotion has changed, but you feel like it hasn't worked, then it's probably just because you just need to keep doing it lots and lots more so that it becomes a habit. Take care for now. Bye-bye.